Okay, let's move to your theme of the Bible. Let's hear it. And who wants to go first? Okay, some good presentations. Let's take a look at now how we could analyze it. I'm going to give you a couple of rubrics to be able to do that. Before we do, I want to read a quote from Goheen, Michael Goheen. He says, if the story of the Bible is fragmented into bits, and he says historical, critical, devotional, systematic, theological, moral, it can easily be domesticated um, by the story of culture. Whatever story is reigning, that can take over. And that's why we need that meta narrative of Scripture to protect us from that. So, what is the grand narrative? Let me give you a couple possibilities. Harold Dollar used to teach there at Biola. God's persistent commitment to ensure that all peoples, i.e., people groups of the world, understand who He is and have an opportunity to experience a personal relationship with Him. Or J.P. Moreland from Talbot, to enter into a rich co-laborship with God in His kingdom in order to establish a community of people who act towards each other as do the members of the Trinity, and to work, play, and explore the created world together forever. And then Vic Anderson, who you heard, um, while man has repeatedly failed to demonstrate fully God's rule, remember that term in his presentation or his video, on the earth, in the end, God certainly establishes His kingdom, enabling man to rule with Him forever. And then Ladd would put it this way: he says, the central theme of the entire Bible is God's redemptive work in history. God is His sovereign design selected this one insignificant people, Israel, that through him He might work out His redemptive purpose, which eventually would include the entire race. Okay, so let me give you a rubric, first one, and this is looking at it from a story perspective. So we'll include, and you can check now as you think through your theme of the Bible as I read through, see what these are included. A protagonist, an antagonist, the issue for God, the issue for people, the resolution, choices, the consequences of those choices, and there could be possibly others as well. You could add, and I'll give you a second rubric here, and this gets a little more detailed, a little more finite. The four values that we looked at before: innocent guilt, honor shame, power fear, purity pollution. You could also add patron client, limited good. In other words, there's only 5 apples in the world. You have 4 of them. The rest of the world only has 1. Can't make more, so it's limited good. That's what they call that. Reciprocity. It's communal in contrast to individual. It's holistic, and it includes Missio Dei. So it has a mission component to it as well. Some of the implications of having a meta-narrative and why it's so important. It deifies put it this way, it deifies who God is, and it does that through demonstration. So we see Him in action, and that it displays His initiative that He takes and His ongoing connectedness with those initiatives that He takes. So He's there for us over time. It spotlights the significant, because you can only include so much, right? And that was your problem. How do you get rid of, what do we get rid of? It encompasses the gospel, the good news. It combats heresy. It frames then trustworthy theology. And one of the things it did is it changed Bible translation. It got us out of starting with the book of Mark and moved us into Genesis to begin the translation process. And it also changed how evangelism was done and how discipleship was done. So those are some significant things that have happened because of the meta-narrative. It unifies the multiple parts that are there, puts them together in a package for us. And of course, we know that its interpretation is always influenced by culture. So we gravitate towards certain stories or towards certain characters. It's our cultural background that does that. And everybody has that. Every group has that. That's why it requires in multiple interpretations to really grasp who God is. And so we need to see it from a Filipino perspective, from a Latino perspective, from an African perspective, and so forth. And that helps us give a better picture of who God is. It doesn't let us write the script. The script's already written. So there's the start point and the end point. And the key one for us here is that it becomes the heart hermeneutic that we use to interpret all other sections of Scripture. The heart hermeneutic, that becomes, even though we may not have ever articulated it, that's what's behind how we interpret every individual part of Scripture. So let me give you a possibility here. I constantly change this thing, okay? And I'll probably change it after this class as well, and add to it, change this or whatever, because it is so important that we have this thing nailed down, and that's why I keep working on it. But here, let me give you a possibility here. The counterfeit adversary tried to usurp the Creator's authority and glory, and was ultimately defeated. Even so, adversary managed to influence Creator's highest creation, humans. They became haughty, disloyal, unclean, guilty, outcasts. This required the Creator to reestablish his rightful rule and glory over all his creation, human, spiritual, and material. To accomplish this, Creator selected Israel to bring forth the mediator Jesus to restore broken relationships through the life, death, resurrection, and ascension. Jesus defeated the spiritual powers and paid the full penalty for sin. Justice through grace prevailed. The Creator's authority and honor were restored, as was human honor. Those from the nations who chose to follow the Spirit and honor Jesus demonstrate their collective loyalty and obedience as worshiping co-laborers. They spread the gospel through word and works, resulting in a global movement. Some experienced suffering, others experienced rest. All impatiently await the Creator's final restoration of this world. So there's a possibility, and I've run that thing through both of those rubrics to try to see how good it comes out and what needs to be added, changed, deleted. And I hope you'll do the same with your own theme of the Bible. But one of the key questions that we can end up with is, who is the hero of your story, of your meta-narrative? Who becomes the hero of your meta-narrative? Let me close with Ivan Illich, definitely not a Christian, but what he says here is so pertinent to what we need to know. Neither revolution nor reformation can ultimately change a society. Rather, you must tell a powerful tale, one so persuasive that it sweeps away the old myths and becomes the preferred story. One so inclusive that it gathers all the bits of our past and our present into a coherent whole. One that even shines some light into our future so that we can take the next step. If you want to change a society, then you have to tell an alternative story. And do we have an alternative story to tell?